we'll start out with a kind of an overview of the process, and then Amber and Katherine are going to tell us about how the community review's playing out in East Helena, Montana. And we'll record this part of the meeting, and then we'll turn the recording off and speak freely with each other. But speak freely now. And if you have questions, feel free to unmute your mic and just dive in. All right. Amber, do you want to kick
Thank
it
you.
off?
Yes, appreciate that. We're excited to share a little bit about what's happening and just wanted to give some context. So we've asked Lorie to share a bit of the history. We're in a transition with WeCAN and the WRDC partnering together. So we're excited about what that future holds. And Lorie, I'll kick it over to you to share a little bit about how we got to this point and what you've built over the years.
Okay. Well, I did not build the community review, but I got involved with the Idaho Community Review in 2003, along with Eric Kingston. It was, I believe was it CUNA? No, that was not my first. Was that my first one? It might have been. Anyway, I am a community development specialist, and there are not many of us in Idaho, and so spread kind of thin. I looked at it as an opportunity to work with agencies and communities around the state to figure out kind of what's going on in small towns and develop a network of partners to work with on their behalf. And I think I've done, 20, 25 community reviews since then. It's kind of an addicting process, as Eric likes to say. What is it? Extreme sport for community development nerds.
That's exactly right. Good memory.
And so in Idaho, the delivery organization has been since like 1999, the Idaho Rural Partnership. And so somewhere along the way, we got exposed to a similar process going on in Wyoming. They called it resource assessments, but they came and did a training with us and taught us how they did their community assessments. And because of that, the process in Idaho morphed a little bit and added a component called listening sessions and bringing different stakeholder groups together as part of the process to just talk about like what they want to see, don't want to see, kind of what are some of their assets in the community, and really looking at that as a way to identify some of the main issues that people want to see addressed in their community. So, and then after that, we I learned that Montana is also doing these community assessments, similar to how Wyoming did them, but with some differences. And Montana Economic Developers Association, which Katherine and her organization are members of in Montana, was doing the community reviews there also since like 2000. Wyoming had been doing them since 2000 at first part of their rural partnership, and then it got kicked over to the Wyoming Business Council. Anyway, Michelle Archie got involved with those folks and was pulling them together to like come together and talk about what they were doing and how the process was working. And since I was on the Wyoming email list because we went through their training, I was like, hey, Idaho wants to play. And Michelle and I started talking, and I had a grad student who did some research based on the surveys we had been doing in Idaho for 15 years. And we ended up talking about bringing all the three states together, the delivery organizations, the extension folks doing community development, and really looking at, what's really working with these processes and what isn't working, and how we might tweak the process to make it better for and more effective for communities. So I wrote two grants, successive grants, first one in 2018 and the second one in 2020. And we came together and we kind of redesigned the process. So if you go to the next slide, Amber, I think I can talk about. So initially, we did not have a phase 2 or phase 3 in the community review process. It was basically we pulled together teams of experts from around the states, different agencies like Eric's Idaho Housing and Finance, and like Department of Commerce, Department of Labor, um, aging, arts, rural development, all kinds of folks, transportation, just whatever the community thought they needed. And we went and we did some listening sessions with stakeholder groups, and we had different focus areas that the community had selected beforehand. And we brought the experts together, and the teams would spend a couple days learning about what's going on in the community, and then we do a presentation back to the community, providing some feedback and suggestions for things they could do to address their challenges. And then we'd write a report and give them the report. Well, part of what we had kept hearing was that some communities failed to follow through. Like there was little follow up or follow through. It was kind of hit and miss as far as providing technical assistance afterwards. And sometimes we heard from community members like they participate in listening sessions and the town hall meetings. They'd be like, we want to do something, how can we be involved? And we'd be like, well, here's the people who, organize the community review in your community, typically like elected leaders and Chamber of Commerce folks, city staff, that kind of thing, city council, and like get it, talk to them. But it was really uneven, the impacts and follow up. So one of the things when we came together to redesign the process was we decided we really need a second phase where people who have been involved in the first phase and even beyond that, after generating some excitement through the process and some interest, is a action planning process where we can give people an opportunity to get involved and to actually implement some of the things that they say they wanted to see. So we added a second phase. We changed a little bit the first phase and really just focused on the listening sessions. We changed the application process. So instead of in the application, say the group of people doing the application saying we want to focus on these 3 focus areas, we just asked for, hey, just give us a general overview of the kinds of things you think you are seeing in your community and think you need. But really what we focus on in that action planning phase, that phase 2 learn, is going to bubble up from the listening sessions. Because one of the things we saw before we did the redesign is that sometimes, those really big things that are really big and important to people in the community did not come up at all in the planning phase. And so this whole visiting team has come here and we get blindsided by things like, oh, we're doing a mayoral recall, or there's some big issue that like really is important to all the people we talk to in the community, but the team that brought us in did not want us to really focus on that. So that created a real disconnect. And so we're just like, let's let the community review the action planning process, what gets focused on in that implementation phase. Let's let that bubble up from the community. And then we added a coaching component. So a lot of times using folks like would be like Erin or Katherine, being the coach to the community to help them kind of troubleshoot as they go through the implementation process after they've created these action plans. And then an evaluation process involving coming back a year or two later and doing ripple effects mapping to see what the impacts were of the process and the action plans that people had created. And then we also Idaho was the only one of the 3 states that was doing survey. And it was every time we did it before redesign, we recreated the survey. We changed the survey to standardize it to a certain extent and provide communities with some questions they could tailor to their own community. But we really wanted to gather data and be able to compare across communities in the 3 states. So we've got like 16 communities now that have done this standardized survey, and we're still in the process of analyzing a lot of that data, but it's been really helpful for us to kind of see things like what inspires people to get involved in their community, and what are some of the barriers to people getting involved, and a lot of other issues, like what are some of the things that across the board are seen as assets and strengths in rural communities, and what are some of the areas that they we tend to see weaknesses or gaps in communities that residents would like to see addressed. So those are kind of the highlights of the things that we did to change it. And the follow-up, we're still doing some ripple effects mapping went through the redesign community reviews, but we're really seeing some more kind of sustained action rather than action that can be done right away, which is great. But in like McCammon, Idaho, as part of the action planning process, that Learn Phase 2, they created a local nonprofit. And that has been really instrumental in, continuing to bring on new projects and new leaders into the community development process locally. So we're seeing more of being able to create those systems that allow them to continue to make changes rather than sort of some of the one-off things that they would do right away. Eric.
I just wanted to mention one thing that Lorie and I how we sort of tweaked the listening session process. At some point, we started noticing that there were really not very many folks that were Hispanic or Spanish speaking. And so we made a point of doing a listening session in Spanish. And I think it was in Glens Ferry. That was the first one. And I was able to contact a Head Start coordinator from nearby who kind of served as our networker person and interpreter in that case. And typically we'd have maybe a dozen or so, or no, yeah, maybe a dozen or more people show up for a listening session from a specific stakeholder category, like working artists or ag folks or whatever. And when we did the first Hispanic listening session, we had 45 adults and they brought 15 kids with them. And the thing that I thought was most that light bulb moment for me was the people, no matter what the language spoken, people wanted the same things for their community. They valued the same kind of things in their community, and they wanted to avoid the same things. So it was a kind of, the distinction was really just linguistic and maybe cultural. But what we heard over and over again was the same 10 people that were always volunteering for everything, the sort of Anglo part of the community. They were tired, they were getting older, they didn't want to have to keep doing all the stuff, and they wanted new people to come in. And what we heard from the Hispanic folks, they were predominantly younger. They really wanted to get involved. They were willing to volunteer. They had resources and skills, but they were never invited to anything. And they didn't know that they'd be welcome if they offered to help. So that was a pretty huge epiphany for us. And we started doing, in southern Idaho primarily, where there's a larger Hispanic population. But I think that's something to really think about. If you're working in communities with a different language base, just how do you get them together? How do you get them to kind of bridge some of those divides? And it could be something other than language that's a division, but that's kind of a challenge.
Yeah, and I think that speaks to sort of the evolution of the process over
Mm-hmm.
time, in that it just really moving towards being more inclusive of voices, and then giving those voices the power to determine what comes out of that process. And that was I think the biggest disconnect is that sometimes, what we heard in the community did not carry over to what got implemented. And when you look at sort of the issues that come up, we have kind of analyzed what people said, what was in applications, the focus areas that like community leaders wanted to focus on, and what came out of the listening sessions. What come out of the listening sessions are things that, like municipalities probably aren't going to focus on because they have so many priorities that they're not able to, like, oh, let's do a mural project downtown, or, let's turn this old building into a community center. I mean, in some cases, yeah, that's, a focus, but sometimes communities are like, they're worried about the water and the sewer and all this other stuff that they have to prioritize on. So I think it allowed for all of these kinds of improvements that people want to see in their community a chance to like actually get implemented. One thing I didn't mention is we also started a mini grant program. So communities that went through the community review would get like a $1,500 grant, not much money, but it's amazing what communities did and how they leveraged those funds to start some really, really cool projects. And I was just kind of surprised that of all the components, that one I think was really impactful.
Wonderful. Thank you, Lorie. Appreciate you sharing that background, and Eric for your comments as well. Um, Lorie and Katherine and I have had the opportunity to be working on a community review right now with East Helena, Montana. So I'm going to kick it over to Katherine to share a little bit more.
Yeah, so as Lorie had mentioned, here in Montana, our state association, the Montana Economic Developers Association, has historically kind of been the overarching entity that facilitates community reviews here in Helena, of course, in collaboration with other folks. But in early 2025, we'd gone through some leadership changes with our state association, and they were revamping the community review process, and we're looking for applications. East Helena, from our perspective, has long been on the list as a good contender for a community review because they're experiencing a lot of growth and change. And so we applied in early 2025 and received it. And over the course of the last year, we have started work and just did our phase 1 this spring. So a little bit about East Helena. East Helena is, it's to the east of Helena. It is now kind of more of a bedroom community. East Helena really grew around the former Asarco lead smelter. This operated for about over a century and was a designated Superfund site in 1984 due to the high levels of lead and arsenic contamination into the water and the ground in East Helena. This led to some cleanup efforts supported by more than $94 million in remediation funding. and it is now, it's become one of Montana's largest environmental restoration projects. Since then, in collaboration with the Montana Environmental Trust Group and some other entities, the ASARCO lands have now been redeveloped and include schools, housing, parks, some retail and industrial uses, and the land is also slated to have some additional homes and expanded commercial development. As I mentioned, East Helena is a bedroom community of Helena. A lot of the folks that live there because it's more affordable, and they commute either to Townsend or into Helena for work. They have a population of a little over 2,000 residents within city limits, and a much bigger population within the school district boundary. Their primary issues as they experience all this growth and rapid change is the capacity of city services, water, sewer, things of that nature. And this is particularly prevalent for those that are living outside of city limits in the county, but within the school district boundaries. There's also kind of some funky stuff around jurisdiction of land services, and it kind of requires some collaboration to address some of these issues. East Helena, there's a lot of wonderful community champions. There's a great school system there. In terms of Helena community readiness, the city and the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, in 2011 had hosted a design charrette for residents of East Helena to kind of determine the vision and the goals as they were redeveloping the Superfund site land. And priorities of the project, one of the outcomes was to support trail development and kind of establish more parks, green spaces, et cetera. And that has since happened. And so it's a community that is kind of ripe for this kind of planning, which is why we applied and received the funding and moved forward.
So we have been, over the last, I guess, probably yearish, been working with East Helena on implementing this. So we had strong support from the local community. We worked with them. We have a contractor on the WeCAN WRDC side that is helping support and kind of help navigating these processes. She organizes us as the visiting team, Katherine and our team, as well as the home team. We call them the home team. So we had a strong representation, about 13 folks that formed a local home team, representatives from city council, their public library, school district, nonprofits, so local businesses, a good variety of folks who stepped forward to say, we want to help make this process successful. And so that started with a series of planning calls, virtual calls that we met with them consistently. We want to get prepared for coming into the community in phase 1. As part of that preparation phase was also a community survey. So we distributed 2,700 postcards. So that went to every resident, as well as those Katherine was speaking about. The school district covers a larger footprint into the county. And so each of those received a postcard that invited them to complete the survey, either online or they could go to the library and do that in person. And we collected those and had a teammate on our visiting team that inputted those into our survey. So we had about 18% response rate on the survey and got a lot of good data going into the in-person visit. So all of that was in the months leading up. In March, then we went in person and had a 2.5-day engagement where the visiting team came in, the home team met together, and we did a series of activities together. So one of those was a physical tour of the community. So the picture there of the bus, they took us as visiting team members to see the community, to talk about some of the things that they've been hearing, some of the assets that they were aware of. And so that we got some of that perspective going into all of the listening sessions. We then helped them facilitate 8 listening sessions with different populations at different locations around the community. So they were held at the library, they were held at schools, they were held at the businesses, and then we would invite the populations in to join us. And we had really strong representation. Over 100 people came out to participate in a listening session. And we'll talk a little bit more about what we learned from those. So this center picture is an example of where we went to the high school and were able to participate in a staff meeting. So all of the high school staff were there. We came in and conducted our listening session, asking them the questions. And then in the evening, we held an open listening session at the city hall, so that if anyone couldn't make it because of time constraints for work or whatever, they could join us at that one and provide their input. So those were held over one full day plus another morning. We also went into the high school and talked to students. I forgot about that one specifically, was an interesting population. And then we, as the visiting team, kind of dialogued with the home team, let them know next steps, got their final input about how they thought the process went, any final thoughts they wanted to contribute. And then we facilitated a public town hall that evening. So we took all of that input and helped them identify what are those big categories that we heard over and over, and took those and presented those. And then at the town hall, everyone has the chance to vote for their top 3. And so that really raised to the top, which of the priority areas does this community want to focus on? So the final picture shows the town hall, one of their residents voting on one of those areas. So that was an overview of the process, but we really had strong engagement. Again, from local businesses, we had old aging populations participate. We had the high schoolers, we had nonprofit organizations, city workers. So we had really good engagement. At each of those listening sessions, we distributed sign me up cards. And so folks could say, yeah, I want to know more, keep me informed, and I may want to be on an action team in phase 2. So we had well over 50 of those collected in this process, as well as people raising their hands saying, I want to stay informed and involved. So that was really exciting to see their engagement.
Yes, so during each of our listening sessions, we asked each group 3 questions. What don't you want to see happen in the next 5 years in East Helena? What do you want to see? And then what do you think of as assets? And we're just going to be touching on what don't you want to see and what do you want to see. And we had so many of the same themes come up over and over. And so a big one, and this seems to be a common theme, both in the other community review I did in Townsend, Montana, and here, is that people do not want to lose the small town character and community identity. It's not that they're opposed to growth. They know it's inevitable, but they want to see it happen in a way that is really authentic to the community identity. Growth without adequate infrastructure planning, that was very specific to East Helena, having just a lot of housing developments, a lot of commercial growth happening. And this was specifically, they did not want to see inadequate infrastructure planning as it relates to water and sewer, city services, things like that. There was also quite a lot of feedback about rising costs burdening existing residents. This was kind of stemming from significant concern about rising utility and infrastructure costs being placed back on the existing residents. There was also quite a lot of people who did not want to see some of the undesirable industries and big box development. If you're in Montana, you know that we have a lot of car washes, we have a lot of storage units, we have a lot of town pumps, and a lot of casinos as well. And so those were some of the industries that we have a lot of that the community did not want to see more of in East Helena. This kind of ties back to the community identity piece that Helena is just about, it's less than 10 minutes away. And so we have a lot of big box development there already. And so the East Helena community would rather see more local businesses, kind of more tailored industrial and commercial building happening there instead. In terms of crime and public safety gaps, there was a lot of concern over the capacity of local law enforcement to be able to adequately handle the growth and rapid change happening. And so they did not want to see, more crime and public safety gaps. Regarding what they do want to see, there was a lot of interest in attainable and diverse housing options. So this specifically included housing for seniors and young people. They want to see more small business growth and employment opportunities. And as Amber had mentioned, we met with high school students, and I always think we just get the best feedback from the high school students. And they specifically were asking for more career pathways, internship opportunities, kind of those factors that reduce brain drain and keep students here after they graduate. So there was a lot of interest in kind of those opportunities for younger people. Senior and social services was also top of the list. Recreation, community, and youth spaces. There was a lot of strong desire for third space, gathering space, for students in the community outside of regular business hours. And so specifically the students wanted to see places where they could do homework, gather, that was not, in parks or at school. Regarding walkability trails and safe roads, this was kind of twofold and came up over and over. People wanted to see both connectivity between amenities, between the trail system, Main Street, the schools, but then also they wanted to see safer pathways. They wanted to see clean curb cuts and turn lanes and bike lanes, safer sidewalks, all those pathways that just makes walking in between places a little bit safer. And then the last one was the community really wanted to see stronger community collaboration and communication. So those were kind of the top topics that were identified in those listening sessions.
And Katherine, we have a question in the chat about the community identity. Can you talk more about if they see themselves distinctly or part of that broader area?
In terms of, does East Helena see itself differently than maybe Helena proper?
Yeah, their personal community identity as compared to part of just the bedroom community, I think.
Yes. So it was interesting because when we had people talk about assets, one of the things that came to the top was one of the assets is that East Helena is not Helena. They see themselves very distinctly different than Helena from kind of the bigger city per se. I mean, Helena has a population of 35,000. It's not too big, but East Helena, specifically, they see themselves as their own community with their own identity, very kind of community, small business oriented. And so that's how they see themselves as different, authentic, kind of unique in their own way. And I think that the history of, the Asarco plant kind of plays into that too. They have a rich history that has really led them to where they are today.
Thank you for sharing that. Lorie, did you have a question, comment?
Yeah, it's interesting, that communication piece. And tomorrow there's a planning meeting for the phase 2 part of the East Helena Community Review. And I'm going to present a little bit of the survey data. One of the things we ask in the survey is for people to fill out. We ask them if they've been in any community projects in the past year and what those are. But we also ask a question. It's an open-ended. I would be more involved in community projects if, and I'm working on a paper right now on that question. And I'm going to present the I just added East Helena to the data set and we'll present tomorrow. But it's really interesting that of all the community surveys we've done, awareness of community projects that need help is by far the biggest category of answers. About 21% over across all the communities. East Helena is 43% of the answers were awareness. A couple of those are, well, if I was asked, but mostly it's just like I mostly hear about things after the fact. And this is kind of across the board in rural communities. And I think shows the value of kind of standardizing that survey so that, that's something we can look into the future and how, what are some best practices? And maybe we should do one of these PLN sessions on that. What's best practices for communicating with people about needs for being involved in community projects. But there's also some kind of leadership issues there and trust, and that, existing leaders, those same 10 people need to make space for new leaders. And that's easier said than done sometimes, is that people like intentionally want to suppress, new voices to come to the fore. But, you're so used to like being in charge, you end up acting like a gatekeeper and, putting your, approving or disapproving of things that come up that people would like to see done. But it's got to be some ability to be comfortable with the messiness of bringing new leaders into the fore.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Yes, so as Amber had kind of mentioned, at the end of our phase one visit, we documented all the feedback and we presented it back to the community in a big town hall meeting, pulled out the top priority areas, and then the community voted on which focus they wanted to carry forward into phase two. And the top three priorities were small business and employment. So really talking about those career pathways for youth, talent retention, Main Street development, and then supporting local business and industries. The second one was broadly social services. So increasing healthcare access, food security, supporting entities like the Helena Food Share, aging services, senior transportation, and mental health resources. There was a lot of talk about, transportation issues for seniors. We don't have a lot of public transit in Helena and East Helena, and so there is an issue with seniors being able to get to and from appointments and just kind of general transportation around town because it's not walkable. Recreation community spaces was our third one, and this really tied in the idea of third space, gathering space, expanded parks and trails, those amenities, a multi-use community center that sports tournaments and other events could be held in. And those were our top three. I think that's all I got.
And that is leading us into what we're currently at is phase two. So as Lorie said, we're working with our home team continuing on. We've drafted and presented to the community both a report and executive summary that I'll share here in the chat in case you want to take a look and learn more. It also has the full report has the survey information that Lorie's been referencing. So if you want to dig into that, that's available. So we've presented those to the community, and now we're working towards phase two in person. So we're having the currently planning about identifying those resources based on those priority areas. Who are the key folks that we can bring to the table that'll share with them, information about what maybe grants are available, what agencies oversee aspects, who they need to develop in partnerships. So we're identifying those through our partners there in Montana and inviting them to come to the table. And then we're also following up with outreach to the community to participate. How do you come participate, tell us how you want to contribute to next steps. Hopefully that's joining an action team. But we're following up on those sign me up cards, as well as just general outreach through the home committee. And so we're looking forward to in mid-July, going back out as a visiting team to help them facilitate this next process, which will include forming of those working groups in each of those areas of priorities and identifying a community coach, as Lorie was talking about in the process. It's really important to have that person that'll be there as a reference and keep checking in with them, as well as what we're doing from the background is in terms of technical assistance. So looking forward to that upcoming engagement. And then, just wanted to talk briefly about, what we hope for them and has come out of others is that short-term progress. Like Lorie was saying, that how that money, that $1,500 actually did make a big difference. It helps them feel those quick wins of supporting their priority area. And so we're excited for that short-term progress in these communities to help motivate them. It also will result in that strengthening of leadership. How do we engage more people so that they feel empowered to create change in their community, and that momentum as we come back in phase three to help them see what was that ripple effect, what beyond just the project was impacted as a result of their efforts of forming these committees and moving things forward, and how can we provide that in that measuring that impact so that it helps them in their next phases. So lots of good outcomes and impacts that are expected through this process for East Helena. And then asked Katherine if she'd share a little bit about what she experienced with Townsend as well.
Yes, so my first community review, this is actually where I met Lorie for the first time, was in 2022, and we were in Townsend, Montana, which is just in a county over. And at the time, Townsend was also experiencing rapid growth, a lot of the same issues. They're pretty rural. They have a population under 3,000. And we had a very successful phase one and phase two process with some kind of neat outcomes. During this process, the primary priorities that came out of the Townsend Community Review were trails and recreation, community space development, broadband, childcare, housing, and senior support services. Each of these topics had a designated committee that came out of it, and these committees still regularly meet and move things forward. I wanted to highlight some of the tangible highlights and deliverables that came out of this in the past few years. On the childcare front, Townsend was a childcare desert for a very long time. And out of this process, there was a very strong childcare committee that formed, and 2 additional childcare facilities opened up, and one was a direct result of a partnership that was built through the community review process in the committee. They were able to obtain 3 grants to support childcare development, increase capacity, and also create an outdoor play area for one of the new facilities on their main street. The community also created they had a development of an in-house pre-K program at their K through 12 school. And they also conducted a lot of data collection to better understand the current state of childcare providers, including a Broadwater childcare provider survey that they put out in 23 that offered a lot of valuable insights into provider experiences and existing gaps in childcare coverage. They also collaborated with the local school to support expanded after-school childcare and extend program hours. And that's just been some really neat, tangible outcomes. Townsend is no longer considered a childcare desert. The newest childcare center is on Main Street, and it is full. And the director over there employs a lot of local mothers, and she has very flexible work hours. It's really neat to see. The other really neat outcome was on the trail and recreation side. Townsend has a lot of neat access to recreation, trails, water access to Canyon Ferry Lake. And they developed a comprehensive trail plan. They had a very really robust trails committee that has since expanded to members from the city of Townsend and the county. They continue to meet and they hold listening sessions to understand community priorities. They also developed an inventory of existing tourism and recreation offerings, and this has allowed them to kind of leverage this and apply for funding. The picture on the left is actually an image of Lorie when she came back to do our ripple mapping session to show the outcomes of the community review. I think this was 2 years after we had completed it. But it's just been really neat. And from an economic development perspective, this process is so valuable. It's one of the few that we see that is very community-led. And we've just been really able to see how communities can leverage this type of planning to apply for more funding or to kind of rationalize their asks. So Townsend was just a great example of this, and we're excited to see how East Helena moves forward in phase 2.
Thank you, Katherine. I just wanted to share quickly, as WeCAN and Western Rural Development Center come together, we are looking at, this great model, but the Western Rural Development Center covers all of the Western states as well as the Pacific Basin, all those. And so, we're going to be doing some strategic planning this summer about how do we scale this work at a level that's not, feasible, but engages more partners. And so we would love to hear from folks who are interested in collaborating as we move forward and identify ways to take this into more rural communities. Lorie, anything you'd like to add about that next steps?
Oh,
Right. We'll appreciate everyone and Katherine especially for presenting, sharing her experiences with both Townsend and East Helena and being a wonderful partner to the WeCAN process.
All right.
yeah, nice job, you two.
Thanks, Amber. Thanks, Katherine. Thanks, Lorie. Thanks, Eric. Thanks, everyone.